Hello, I'd like to tell you about some legal protections for genetic information. I'll specifically focus on the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. So why do we have this particular law that we also call GINA? I'm reading directly from this law. The American public and the medical community find the existing patchwork of state and federal laws to be confusing and inadequate to protect them from discrimination. Genetic privacy matters. GINA allows individuals to take advantage of genetic testing technologies, research, and new therapies. GINA prohibits employers from asking for or purchasing genetic information. It also prohibits employers from using genetic information to make employment decisions, such as hiring and firing. There are some exceptions to GINA. It does not apply to life, long-term care, or disability insurance. In addition, it does not apply to employers with less than 15 employees. But it's important to check state employment laws. GINA does not apply to the U.S. military, but the Department of Defense has its own policies. It also does not apply to TRICARE or Veterans Health or Indian Health or Native American service plans. But these health plans have their own policies. Finally, GINA does not apply to employees of the federal government, but an executive order protects federal employees. Next up is an interview with a cancer genetic counselor to provide some impactful information on how genetic privacy laws apply to genetic counseling and testing. Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Yuriko Beaman. I am a genetic counseling student, and I'm excited to introduce Tifany Lewis, who is a cancer genetic counselor. She is based in Norfolk, Virginia, and she has been a cancer GC for 18 years. Good morning, Tifany. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to provide just a short rationale for this interview. Genetic anti-discrimination laws, such as GINA, protect patients' privacy and confidentiality, but I think often patients and individuals interested in genetic counseling and testing aren't fully aware of the laws, GINA, as well as others that protect them. So wanted to ask you some questions, and a lot of them are somewhat hypothetical in nature, to help our viewers to get a sense of how GINA and these other laws could really apply to them in a genetic counseling context.
Yeah.
So thanks. Awesome. Awesome. So let's say you are meeting with a genetic counseling client and they share worries about their employer or their health insurance. They fear that these companies could use their genetic information against them. What would you say to that client?
Yeah. So I think that is a very common concern that I hear from patients. And I'm always happy to explain to them the current laws that we have in place to provide protection against genetic discrimination. So as your video so excellently just demonstrated, we have GINA, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And I always like to highlight that GINA has two parts, Title I and Title II, where it provides protection against health insurance discrimination. So their health insurance companies are not allowed to use this information against them in a negative way. And then the same for their employers. I highlight that if they work for a company that has at least 15 other employees, then they have protection under that law, and this information cannot be used in a negative way against them. So I'd like to reassure them in that way, making them aware of some limitations, but normally that information is enough to help them feel a little bit more comfortable about pursuing testing.
Absolutely. And I think there's a big difference between reading it on a piece of paper versus hearing it from a genetic counselor. So I think it's
Right.
great that you're having these conversations with your patients and clients.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm also wondering if there is a patient who's experienced unfair treatment in the workplace, they could really worry that their genetic testing could impact their employment. Just to clarify, can employers use their genetic information, and if they could use it, in what way can they use it?
Yeah. So in general, the answer is no. Employers would not be able to use genetic testing information against an employer, again, because that's covered under the GINA Act. So for most individuals, that information is there to protect them. There are some limitations. So if a patient is considering going out on leave for FMLA because they're caring for a family member who might have a genetic condition, and that's the reason for their leave, that information might have to be shared with their employer so that they are granted that leave, but they are still protected, and so they should not be discriminated against based on that information.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. Um, Also, I'm also wondering because many people have used an at-home
Mm.
DNA test kit, often to learn about their ancestry. And I know that genetic counselors, we in our field, we call these direct-to-consumer tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And some of these kits have started to offer information on breast cancer related genes. And I'm wondering, can employers use those results? And also, can health insurance companies use those results as well?
So that's a very good question. I think direct to consumer testing is becoming more mainstream. There are commercials. You can pick up a test in some situations at your local pharmacy. And individuals are very curious, about their genetic information and want the autonomy to order testing like this at their will. As far as protection, GINA still applies because it's genetic testing information. So they have that protection against their health insurance or their employers using it against them. But I would encourage individuals to read the privacy plans that these companies have and how they might or may not use this information to share with other third parties. So they may not follow the same laws that health insurance companies do, or typical HIPAA policies. So you want to make sure that if there is an option to opt in or opt out of them sharing your genetic testing information, that you do that. So I would just say read the fine print, understand what you're getting into, know that yes, the information is still protected under GINA, but you want to be careful about privacy and how that information could potentially be shared with others.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. There's often a lot of fine print, but it's so important, I think, in this case to make sure that we read it. And I have also really found genetic counselors to always be so helpful and supportive. So I think it's always good to reach out to a local genetic counselor and ask some questions as well. Yeah, awesome. So my final question for you. So let's say a patient has family members who had breast cancer before the age of 50, and this particular patient meets with you, and their testing results indicates that they have a BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene change. Generally speaking, are there legal protections for them from any unfair treatment?
Yes. Yes, so that individual would be having testing prior to a diagnosis being made. So that information, again, is genetic testing information, which would be included under our privacy laws and GINA at this time. So that information may need to be shared with their healthcare provider in order, and excuse me, not only their healthcare provider, but their insurance companies, so that they can receive coverage for some of the management recommendations that are made for our BRCA1 and BRCA2 carriers. So they will have to share, but again, they're still protected, where that information cannot be used to discriminate against them, because, again, GINA is in place. As your video highlighted, there are some exceptions, right? And so GINA doesn't apply to active duty military, individuals employed by the federal government, and some others. But as you also highlighted in the video, they have their own policies in place to provide protection for their employees, excuse me. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think I really like that you made that distinction between, yet, yes, you do have to share the information, but maybe in order to receive some additional services and to get your insurance company to cover things, but protections are also available. I think that's key.
Right, right, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that you think would be really helpful for our viewers to know?
Absolutely. I think it's important to validate viewers' concerns about genetic discrimination. There are real stories of individuals being impacted by discrimination in our society, especially when it pertains to our Black and Brown patients. So I absolutely understand why someone might, draw pause and be hesitant to pursue this. But as you noted at the beginning, I've been a genetic counselor for almost 20 years in the cancer setting for 18 years. And I've seen a lot of individuals who have benefited from knowing their genetic testing information. It is empowering. It can be life saving, not only for the patient, but potentially their family members. So I would encourage anyone who is interested in genetic testing to speak with a genetic counselor, their healthcare provider, if they have additional questions about the laws that are not only federal, but within their state to provide them protection, and certainly give it strong consideration.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is just a perfect way to end our talk. And I do hope when I post this video on YouTube and other places, if people have questions, I'll do my best to get back to them. But thank you so much, Tiffany, for your time this morning and for sharing the wealth of your experience.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you again for having me.
No problem.